I have Matt Harward and Stafford Newsome, and we have a workshop that we're doing on August 22nd that you can join, and it's absolutely free. If you go to aiadsworkshop.com, you'll be able to see all of the details. They're actually flying in. They're going to be here in the studio. We're going to be diving into AI, advertising, how it all ties together. And these two smart dudes are going to be doing the teaching, and I'm going to be in the room, kind of facilitating, being the comedic relief as needed. And it's going to be good. Go register, aiadsworkshop.com. And so today, what we're going to kind of do is overview a little bit of what they're going to be covering during that workshop. Hey everyone, welcome to the Ecommerce Alley podcast. Today I have back for the second time with one of you and the third time with the other. I have Matt Harward and Stafford Newsome, and you're going to want to pay attention. This is going to be a very entertaining episode, but also incredibly insightful. If you don't know who Matt Harward is, or Stafford Newsome, you need to. We have episodes on them on episode 57, 58. Go listen to them on AI. But Matt has spent over $54 million of his own dollars on Facebook ads just in the last 4 years alone. He focuses heavily on leveraging algorithmic marketing. He's built 6 8-figure brands. He's been on the Inc. 500 with 2 of them. And then recently he's been working as the chief marketing officer in a publicly traded company. Stafford has been working with Matt for a good while, and he is actually the co-founder with Matt of Unicorn Industries, where he's kind of like the supercharger they take Unicorn Industries. They have a lot of testing methodologies and a lot of scientific ways of algorithmically scaling and growing these brands. And so Stafford and Matt are 2 of the smartest people I have known in the marketing world. And so every time I get to bring Matt and Stafford on, we always have a really good time. And so today in particular, we're going to be talking about AI and AI with advertising, how they kind of tie together. But I guess the question I would have for both of you, and maybe anybody who's listening and wondering the same thing, is why is AI important? And even on that, like, why is it important in advertising?
So why should you care, right?
Why should anyone care other than we see it all over the place?
Here's the bottom line for AI on this. And the first of all, I don't think it has to be AI. But here's what does have to happen in this day and age. Right now, we are in an age where algorithmic marketing, it dominates the landscape, especially if you're in e-commerce, if you're online. Algorithmic marketing, which is just a fancy way of saying marketing where distribution is controlled at some level by some formula that somebody's got. So whether that's Facebook or whether that's Amazon or Google or TikTok, YouTube, it doesn't really matter. What matters right now is that we are increasingly being driven by these algorithms, and you don't have to know what the algorithms are, but you just look around; they're everywhere. And part of what those algorithms want, they want to be fed. They want to have a lot of tests run on them. And when I would ask people, well, so how many tests are you running in your marketing? How many experiments are you getting in? And I don't even know what I was expecting people to have, but people are like, man, we're really hauling. We tested. I mean, if they tested 10 things in a week, that was a lot. And rarely did I find people who are really even running tests at that level. And the surprise to me was, in this day and age, with the platforms that are out there right now, you can't be running 10 tests a week. You can't be running 20 tests a week. You're just not getting enough coverage. You're not getting enough engagement with the algorithms that are out there, and seeing people who think they're testing a lot. And I know you ask people this question a lot more often than I do, mostly because you talk with people a lot more often than I do. But when you ask how much testing you're doing, and here's the thing, everybody knows they're supposed to be testing, right? Everybody knows I should test more. Everybody knows I should test more creative. I should test more on my landing pages. But testing is not necessarily obvious how to test a lot. And most people who do test poorly. And I think we're at the front end of something really special here, but also something that if you don't I think it's going to move past people really fast, and it's going to go from a huge competitive advantage to, if you're not doing it, just like the Facebook pixel from Josh. I don't know when you got in on Facebook, but I was in on Facebook when this magical new thing called the pixel came out. Nobody knew how to use it, and if you just used the pixel, you had this massive advantage over all of your competition. And then you had a little bit less of an advantage, a little bit less, a little bit less, until now. If you don't use the pixel, like, you just you can't even really do anything on Facebook if you don't use the pixel. I don't know how you would do it without the pixel. And that took a few years for that transition to fully happen. But I think it's going to happen faster with AI, but I think that same transition is going to happen, where right now it's going to be huge advantage. Eventually it's just going to be, man, if you're not doing this, you just can't even, you're not going to be able to effectively advertise your e-commerce business. Or I don't even know if I answered the question there now.
I think you are. Well, the story that I'm thinking about is you got on and people were answering, and these were agencies as well. So they have, full teams of people running things. And a lot of people were trying to flex their muscles saying, I'm running, 10 tests a week or something like that for each brand or something like that. And to your point, Matt, the algorithm, across whatever platform you're working with, wants to be fed. It wants a strong signal, and it wants that to be consistently changing. It values freshness, not just for your scale campaigns and what you're doing there, but for learning as well, both positive and negative signals. So interestingly enough, we have actually tried to attack this problem multiple ways. Years ago, we had a funnel theory of relativity in Einstein picture in Matt's office laying around.
I like that naming convention. That's great. Piggybacking.
Yeah, okay, hang on. You have to picture this, though. We had just moved into our offices, and I had two big whiteboards on either facing wall, big glass whiteboards, and it wasn't even close to enough surface area for me. So we went down to like Home Depot and just got a big bathroom board. It was like a 4x8,
like a linoleum, board for the shower.
Yeah, it was just leaned up against the wall. And I started writing this stuff on it that ended up having a lot of formulas and other things. So Ford at one point named it the funnel theory of relativity. And that became somewhat famous in the office for all of the stuff that I kind of lived in as a memorial to what I like to nerd out about.
Oh, yeah. Anyway. So what to get back to the funnel theory of relativity, we realized that proving out concepts all the way through the funnel is a much stronger way to achieve scalable, find scalable modalities and scalable ads for your business. But the amount of input that you need to give an algorithm is not humanly possible. So we try to attack it in a few ways. We've gone the mechanical Turk route originally, where we just hired a ton of people, both outsourced and in office, and just threw as many people as we can on that. And that wasn't really sustainable with how fast the algorithm can move and what it can do. And then we moved on to part automation, part mechanical Turk. Had me doing the front end tests, and I had a couple staff writers doing the longer form tests and running that out. And that still didn't get us up to the numbers. And then about a year before ChatGPT really became a thing, Matt and I had like a 3-hour call about AI is coming. When it becomes viable and cost efficient to actually use it at scale, this is how we're going to use it. So we had a whole year of processing and thinking about this process and how we're going to leverage it. And luckily we were right about how it leverages an individual ability to essentially do the job of a whole entire marketing floor in terms of testing needs and feeding the algorithm. So while Matt was talking, I pulled up some stats that I shared with Dylan the other day. So I've, over the last few years of testing this method, have worked with very few brands, but very different industries on purpose, because I want to see how robust this is and where we can really apply this methodology. And so in the last 6 months, I've only worked with 2 brands, one in the digital space, one in the physical space. But I've run over 3,000 tests on those 2 brands, which comes up to 11.7 tests a day. And I'm not actually running tests every single day. I'm probably just focusing on like a test batch once a week and then letting it run automated through our systems and through what we've built here. But what it turns out to be is every single day, 7 days a week, I'm doing what an agency was originally bragging about doing in a whole entire week's work for their brand. And that's all by leveraging AI.
And when you say test, can you clarify what you mean by that? When you say you run 11 tests in a day?
Yeah. 11, 12 tests a day. It means that there's an ad running on it at some point, and it's a test that's either happening on the ad platform. Almost all of them are happening on the ad platform of Facebook or Google or TikTok or whatever. Or it's a test that came from revenue that I was pushing through. So something deeper in the funnel, like on a landing page or a bridge test or something to gauge, engagement intention and those elements as well. So these tests are all things that I'm betting money on and that I'm trying to isolate and measure in terms of audience action.
And AI is amplifying the speed at which you're able to do that.
Oh my gosh, at a mind-boggling rate. Yeah.
What was it like? If we were what was it like before leveraging ChatGPT? Like how many tests a day on average would you say?
Oh my gosh. If you think about all the
automations immediately prior that could still let us roll through a fair amount, but I don't know, what could we do? 50 in a week, Ford?
Yeah, I'd probably say 50 in a week.
50 good ones?
Yeah. Yeah,
and if I could, by the way, I was just looking this up while Ford was talking because I've got a couple of quotes by Jeff Bezos. Not for this; these are just quotes that I've really enjoyed. They spark me, and he has a quote that he says that I really appreciate because I don't think people understand this at Amazon with how the pace at which they've grown and what they've been able to do. But he has a quote that says, "Our success at Amazon is a function of how many experiments we do per year, per month, per week, per day." That's it. That's what they boil everything down to is how many experiments, how many tests can we run? I believe, don't quote me on this, but somewhere out there, I think I saw something that Amazon's rolling something new into production every 14 minutes. They're obviously doing this at an even higher scale than we are. But so much of business comes down to this. How many experiments can we get in? How many clean experiments? How many new pieces of knowledge can we push on and bring into our business at a faster and faster and faster rate? Because that really becomes the kind of the building block for everything else that we do in the company is this early on experimentation and being able to press out and we have several names for this, but to have kind of this proof-oriented testing that goes on to where every time as we get deeper and deeper and we're building a funnel, I'm going up, I should probably be going down because most people think of the funnel as the top funnel down to the bottom, but to be able to do that in a proof-oriented, evidence-oriented way very quickly, very accurately, very reliably to have these frameworks that let us move faster than I ever thought. I mean, again, when I first started this, I thought, man, if we could just get to where we can eliminate the Facebook, just the boilerplate on Facebook for setting an experiment up and getting going. And we applied some automations and got rid of some of those things and got that down to where we can set up experiments in just a few seconds instead of even 20 minutes. And at first it's like, yeah, that's a win. But now with AI, the speed and rapidity at which we can do these experiments is, I mean, it's amazing to me what we can do, and it's getting better every day.
Cool.
Yeah, and one common thought that I've heard is when I'm talking to other business owners when I start introducing this method is, so you guys are basically just, you love the pain of testing constantly. You're just throwing spaghetti at the wall and there's no thought behind this. And what about the creative threshold of a professional marketer who can create high resolution video and creatives and all that stuff? And I think that's a rather myopic approach to marketing as a whole, because at some degree it's, yes, we are testing things all over the place, but we're putting thought into it. And there is a degree of of conscious decision making, even with AI. But how we view this is we run all these tests and we build these confidence thresholds all the way down the funnel, so that by the time it comes to the point where we need to invest $10,000 into the best copywriter, or we need to hire a full entire
Ford doesn't know about copywriters,
like
Scott.
that.
Forgive him.
Man, I'm trying to give realistic numbers here, not your. I'm not trying to hire your best copywriter.
Yes.
My best copywriter. Let me put this in, a theory of relativity here. So, anyways, before you drop thousands and thousands of dollars on those top tier marketers, we have this degree of confidence that we've built all the way down there. So, our tests are low risk, and when it's time to take that next step and that next risk as a business owner, it's really not the risk; it's the next logical step to take, and that's really a beautiful aspect of what we've been trying to build here.
Yeah. Well, I know that from many hours behind the scenes of us getting the honor to work with you guys and learn a lot on this, there's things that we've been able to do in our business. I think I told you both the story. We were about to hire a copywriter 4 months ago. It was like 3 or 4 months ago. And then we hopped on a call with you, and we were meeting with you, and you talked to us about creating these bots and AI assistants that will basically do this stuff for you. And now we have AI assistants that write podcast headlines, write podcast descriptions, write this type of an email announcement, write this type of Facebook group post, write this type of insert, whatever, in so many areas. So I would love to. We by the way, we still haven't hired a copywriter. We're just like, well, this is good enough. We can pump this out really fast. Eventually we'll have someone that fine tunes it, but it's not worth it yet. And that changed our business. Like, that's a huge expense. I should pay you guys a cut of what I would have paid a copywriter salary.
A cut of that $10,000.
Yeah, the $10,000. Was that per year, Stafford?
No, I was. Yeah, this is a copywriter, the best one out of pick a country we outsource to.
But if we could, I'd love to dive into. So the four topics you're going to be diving into, and the concepts you're going to be breaking down on the workshop is, number one, creating customer avatars with AI. Number two, naked message testing, which sounds interesting to anyone probably listening who's ever heard of that. Number three is a rapid experimentation. And then number four is using AI to test ads. So if we could, let's dive in a little bit and talk a little bit about each one of those points. So the first thing I know you're going to be covering on the workshop is creating customer avatars with AI.
Can I take a step, one step back before we get into this? Because I think this is important to understand here. In business, especially in small business, which is probably most people who are listening to this are likely founders at some level, small business owners. We talk a lot about having this like bias towards action, just take massive action, do something big. And the first big chunk of success that people are likely to get in their lives is going to come from just taking action, from just doing the thing, right? I hope that makes sense. But we hear a lot about taking action. We don't hear about the next step. And the next step is where I see so many founders trip and fall. And that is that you've got to be able to take now the next big level of success comes from taking this action or this bias towards action and being able to build a decision support framework around it. Now it's about making sure that your bias towards action is biased towards the right action, towards the next most effective action. There are two things that I want to caution people against. One is taking that super vanilla approach to AI that, in fact, at some point we probably ought to talk about why AI tends to be so vanilla, because most people went in and they tried ChatGPT once or twice or, maybe a half dozen times. And there's that first magic of, oh my gosh, it just wrote this thing for me. And then you realize, it wrote an okay thing for me. It's not going to beat me at what I do, as a founder or business owner or whatever else. So there's that first part of it, but then there's also that, I think, people who get maybe whose eyes roll back in their head a little bit, like, oh man, AI's all this and algorithms, and they're using these fancy words, and it feels maybe like it's a lot. But the reason that I like it, the reason that we use a lot of it, look, listen to Ford talk. Dude's from Tennessee, and he's got that down south accent and stuff. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to do this stuff here.
We grammar real good from where I'm from.
Yeah, you done grammar good today, Ford. But I think I don't want to be too simplistic on the one side, because I think that's probably the most common mistake people make. But I also don't want to be so advanced on the other side. There are advanced things that we can do. Don't be too simplistic, but also don't feel like, oh my gosh, there's just so much going on. It's 4 steps. They're pretty simple steps. Once you master these steps, there's a tremendous amount of power that you can have just by getting better and better and faster and faster and faster at your decision-making process, which is really what this is about. That's what rapid experimentation is about. It's that in a typical business, for every 2 decision cycles that they go through, I'm going to go through 20. And eventually you just won't be able to, you can hustle and grind all you want. You just can't. You're not going to be able to beat that speed. You're not going to be able to beat that effectiveness as we go through that. So that's it, Josh. I just wanted to put that in front of it, that it's just, this is a simple 4-step decision support framework. And when you figure out the power of these, it really unlocks the typical entrepreneurs, the typical founders' bias towards action. This is how you unlock the next level, in my experience.
All right. That's a good setup. Well, let's get into it then. So when we first sat down and started talking through, hey, what are the if there are 4 things to cover that are the most important, and in what order, what would those be? It ended up being the first thing you wanted to dive into is creating customer avatars with AI. And in my brain, and this is just me, I go to I've been doing this for 10 years. I know my customer avatar, I know the ideal customer. But so I guess my question is for you, when you're thinking of how you're going to apply AI to business in the different aspects, especially in advertising, why is that the starting point for you, would you say?
So here's why it's where I started. Do you remember I don't know if people these days even play this anymore, but there was a game when I was growing up, 20 Questions. Did you ever play 20 Questions?
Oh yeah.
And so it's like, I think of, if it was playing with my daughter, I think of some Harry Potter character. She's got 20 questions to figure out who it is that I'm talking about. And there was almost miraculous power in those questions, because if you ask the right questions, you could discover anything, right, in less than 20 questions. And it was kind of this miraculous thing. And so I think in our businesses right now, if we can ask the right 20 questions to the right people, there is almost this miraculous power. When it works, it's just this oh my gosh, I had no idea that this was sitting out there in my business, that there was this opportunity sitting out there, or that there was this customer segmentation or this voice that was out there. And so one of the things that we have, Josh, to your point, I think we've all been taught some version of that. You got to know your customer. You got to have your customer avatar. But that came from this mindset, this really, what I would consider at this point to be a very old school mindset of find your customer avatar, your 1, your 2, maybe your 3 customer avatars. And now with AI, we've got an ability to kind of, again, if playing 20 questions is this magic game when you actually guess right, imagine being able to do that at scale. Imagine being able to play that 20, 30, 40, 50 times and do this repeatedly, just have these magic interactions with your customers. And so part of this is just the scale of it. Part of this is now the ability to have, I'm going to use a fancy word here, what we call bespoke conversations. And that all that means is just, it's a unique, individualized conversation with more and more of your audience members, which is both the avatar itself. So who is the audience? Who's the customer that we're talking to? But also what's the come from of this customer of the voice that we're coming into the conversation with. Facebook loves audience breakdowns. Now, for the first time, we can lean into audience breakdowns from a segmentation standpoint, audience breakdowns from a conversation standpoint. And again, Facebook loves it, but your audience is going to love it even more. Their ability to, or their likeliness, their willingness to respond to these bespoke, these individualized conversations, these individualized voices that come out is really a powerful, powerful component of how to leverage AI.
So once
Ford,
you,
I don't know if you have anything to add to that, or yeah, go for it with
well,
questions.
so I was going to ask, so like once you have this, like, so creating customer avatars, it's like once you've created that avatar, like what's an example of a use case? Like what would that actually, how would that apply in advertising?
Yeah.
A use case of an, go for it, Ford.
Well, I might as well want to clarify as well, since you're doing that. A use case for how we would use the AI in avatar situation. Is that what you're saying?
Or how we would use the avatar itself.
So I guess two questions. So one, how would you begin? I know there's probably a lot within it, but how would you begin to create the avatar? And then once you've created the avatar, how would you use that as a lens, or maybe use that as a application toward your advertising?
We'll go over this in the workshop in much more in depth, but every single AI, as we're building out these avatars, needs a role, needs a goal, needs some rules and an idea behind it. And it's kind of a chart that I've built up to really build these personas, and we introduce those roles and goals and what we're trying to create with the AI. And through a process of literally 20 questions, answering questions back and forth with the AI, we'll come up to an avatar where we can even assign a persona, and then use it in multimodal ways. So one way is that we can essentially create an internal system prompt that, which is not near as scary as it sounds, if you're not using AI, that will retain the personality that you want to work with, so you can come back to it over and over again, or so you can have two personalities interact with each other and see what those kind of messaging outcomes could happen. So if we were to do one of our foundational tests, which is naked messages and flash tests, I think you guys call it rapid experimentation at the Ecommerce Alley. We have our avatars assume roles, and we have the salesperson avatar assume roles, and we have them talk to each other. And then we also have them analyze our content and do all these other really interesting things from the viewpoint of our avatars. And what's super cool about that is it can hold a level of personality and such a different degree of viewpoints and so many different personalities that a human could never do. So when we had the marketing floor, we might have a copywriter that could reasonably write to 3 or 4 strong avatars and kind of get by with the rest of them. But, an AI can hold what you want to hold, and it can do it for hundreds. I don't think there's really a limit for how many avatars you can work with there.
I've been looking the last 8 months or so since Chat GPT 3 or whatever really blew up. I think it was November of last year, something like that. And I even look in that amount of time.
Released in November, and then 3.5 I think was in February or something.
Yeah. Now we have 4, and it's only $20 a month or whatever. I mean, it's so like, I even look at the progression of that and what we used to have spitting out at the beginning versus what we even have outputting now. And it's like 8 months. Like it's dramatic differences. And this is before we were even leveraging things like these avatars that you talk about and naked message testing and rapid experience. And so this just amplified all the stuff that we're doing, and it's so fast. But if we could, so like you build this, once you have this avatar or avatars, you then talk about naked message testing. Like, what in the world is naked message testing, and why would we do that?
But in the quickest way, a naked message test is a test that's designed to isolate every single distracting variable an audience member might encounter on an ad besides the message you want to convey, to the extent that you can control it. So every single variable that we can control on a ad test that we're running forward, we're controlling for it, and we're taking that variable out, except for the physical words, like the actual message that we're conveying. So a naked message, in the term that it's stripped down and it's naked, we're not having images, we don't have all these other elements to our test. And the goal there is that we use AI to help generate these things at scale, but we put them out there into the marketplace, and we're really measuring at that level a very low threshold of engagement, because it's such a I don't know if bland's the right word, but it's such a non-obtrusive way to introduce a message to a potential audience that if they're engaging with it at scale, if they're engaging with it at an outlier degree of engagement, it's a pretty good confidence indicator that you should probably chase that and that you might have a scalable audience or a scalable message which is within an existing audience.
And if I could just change or add to that a little bit, way too many marketers, I think, try and get sexy and tricky too soon with their ads and their creatives. And by that, I just mean
100%.
They start introducing conversion-oriented elements that are designed to, maybe it's, we all hear, introduce social proof or authority or urgency and some of the other things. And all of those, by the way, are great conversion mechanisms. The problem is when they cloud and confuse the initial messaging on your ad. So you can have a message, but if they're not responding to that core offer, I don't want to sexy it up. I don't want to bias. I know that I can introduce those biases later on. But when you start by just testing the naked elements themselves, it really is staggering. One, it's staggering how many messages you think are working, but are just being propped up by clickbait type elements and things that, by the way, Facebook hates. They do not like that type of aggressive, even if they're solid marketing principles, they tend to take away from your distribution or make your distribution more expensive. And when you can boil it down. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I was about to say, to talk about Facebook hating, my naked messages, you'd be shocked by how ugly they are. I'm going to show them to you. And you'd be shocked to know how high a quality. For the ones I graduate, the amount of quality that Facebook attributes to them is mind-boggling.
Yes.
I get incredibly positive feedback from Facebook. They love it. And I'm not running conversion campaigns. That's another element of conversion I'm taking out of this at this stage. At this stage,
we don't want the algorithm to over-optimize on those things yet. And again, when you get into this mindset, at least when we first started testing on it, it's like, man, this is totally backwards. But now that we're into it, we look at other stuff and it's like, why are you doing that right now? You're just muddying the waters. You don't actually know how powerful your conversion elements are versus how powerful your core message is. And by the way, here's what we found on these core messages is the core messages, we might have a whole slew of messages that get, I'm just going to make up numbers here, but they get a 4% engagement rate on something. And then we'll have 2 of them that get 9%. I mean, it's this huge difference when you find this core naked message where it's like, oh my gosh, this is the thing that our audience wants to talk about. This is the thing that this is where the avatars come into play and where we can kind of splinter these things out. This avatar really, really wants to talk about this message. Now we can start optimizing that message. Now we can start applying, real conversion principles. I have marketers, like legit marketers, all the time laugh at me like, you don't know what you're doing. And it's like, well, again, I got $54 million spent on Facebook that says I absolutely know what I'm doing. If you could just get past all of this brain training and by the way, we used to have to do that. You used to only get 1 or 2 shots. So you came out of the gate swinging. You came out of the gate with every conversion element that you knew. But you'd be shocked when you ask the right question, when you have just the right message to your audience. They will absolutely eat it up, and you don't have to have urgency on it, and you don't have to have a limited time offer, and you don't have to have all of this other stuff on it. When you hit the right message, you know it immediately, and it's probably going to be something that surprises you. I should say it routinely surprises us which ones are outliers and which ones really get a ton of run with our avatars.
So what I was gonna bring in here is, so like we have a mentorship program that we teach Facebook ads and email to e-commerce brand owners, and it's always interesting because you can, when I look at so many ads and I'm reviewing ads, we have coaching sessions all week throughout the week. And I have access to like 200 ad accounts almost. So we have so many ad accounts we're in. And there are, if you look at the ones that are just crushing it, like some people come in and within like 3 months, 90 days, you're talking like 5X, 7X, sometimes even more X growth within it. When you look at the ads that they've gone through rapid experimentation, which I know you're going to talk about in a second, and they have found that message, it really resonates, you could just tell the differences in it. And the ones that don't are usually super generic. It's usually focused around, oh, here are all the features of our product. There's no real message behind it other than buy my products in the case of e-commerce. And I'll tell a story. So like we had someone come in last September last year, something like that. And she comes in and she sells dog gear, and she sells like these scarves that she makes. These like bandeau dog scarves is what she calls them. And all of these different messages she tried for conversion before had never worked because she was focused around like, oh, our scarves are super stylish. They're cute on the dog. All of these, the messages around the cute and the colors and all of this. And then as soon as she figured out the messaging was, are you tired? Like, are you tired of what? Are you tired of dog bandanas? Try these new unique scarves, because everyone was sick of bandanas. So the messaging that resonated was, I'm just tired of bandanas. And then all of a sudden her ads like blew up. And that's what it was. It was just saying, hey, are you tired of bandanas? Because everyone's dog has a bandana. But anything else she did, nothing has even come close to outperforming that ad 8 months later or so. So anyway, I was just saying that on.
By the way,
so
then
important.
you can layer in all of those conversion elements, all the conversion optimizations. But the optimizations rarely save bad messaging, and most people have. To your point, Josh, I think most people have very generic messaging because they've taken what they think is the most obvious thing, and sometimes that's true. But I mean, sometimes that's also the thing. But I would say it's by far the exception for the obvious thing to also be the thing.
Yeah, I think so many are generic, but it's the ones that take the time to do what you call naked message testing and test tons of variations and rapidly experiment those are the ones that win. Like I think of One Wheel. I don't know how familiar you are with One Wheel.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so One Wheel, destroy boredom. I mean, that's just the messaging angles they did around the idea of destroying boredom, I thought was brilliant. And it's so unique, and it's not something that you see very frequently, even though I'm sure a lot of industries could use that. And so I believe, they didn't probably use the way you do testing to find this, but they found that messaging, and that has been a huge forerunner of their campaigns for so long. But this is good. So naked message testing, you get your message. Let's talk about rapid experimentation. This was probably the first episode, don't quote me, like 17, Matt, I had you on. Like you're one of I can't believe you even gave me the time of the day. We were episode 17 in the podcast, and you talked about rapid experimentation. And that changed our whole ability to scale even our own ads and what we now teach our clients from the grandfather himself here. So could you explain?
I am old enough to be a grandfather.
Could you explain rapid experimentation a little bit, like what it is and how you apply it to ads?
Yeah. So I've got some really rapid experimentation is where all of this started, by the way. So it wouldn't surprise me if I remember correctly. This probably predated AI and everything, right?
Yes.
But rapid experimentation this is kind of how I built my businesses, my brands up. And so the concept is, I think it's simple, but maybe not. But on this spectrum of what I would consider high frequency and high frequency on this side, low frequency on this side. We're trying to push down as far as possible into very high frequency with our ads. But with that, if we have to apply copywriters, if we've got to apply video editors, if we've got to apply, there's a lot of resources that come along that we would call high threshold resources. And most people can't, they're trying to get more experiments in, but they're doing it with all of these high threshold resources. And the mix just doesn't work. So when we went to a true rapid experimentation process, it's this weird combination of giving up a tremendous amount of what people would normally associate with ad creative. We're not trying to be good looking. We're not trying to be, because those things take time and they take effort. We're trying to come up with, well, what's the lowest? Think of a lot of entrepreneurs these days understand the concept of an MVP when it comes to a minimum viable product. We're really trying to come up with, well, what's a minimum viable ad? What's a minimum viable creative, minimum viable message, minimum viable even piece of content? And how rapidly can we test on very specific individual pieces of that and gain meaningful learnings from it, such that when we do eventually go back what we consider high threshold, which is now we've got our video editors engaged, now we've got our creative people engaged, or our copywriters engaged, or whatever, we've had enough learnings down in this rapid process that we can start to, when we do start to slow things down, it's very, very, very effective to do that. Most ideas for angles and hooks and all these things, most of them aren't as good as you think. So we sit around in these brainstorming sessions trying to only do good things. Well, what if we could flip that on its head? And instead of only doing good things, what if we could test on everything? And the rule around our office is it can't be actively bad. So as long as it's not actively bad, we're building these systems that lower the bar for testing, that lower the bar for what it takes to be considered a viable test, and constantly, like I'm really hardcore about lower that bar, because for most people, that's a much better path to success. Most people, volume is a better path to success. Quantity is a better path to success than quality. Because most people, and I hope I don't offend anybody with this, but just most of us aren't these really genius, creative type people who come up with great copy time and time again. Most of us would be far better served by going with high quantity, by throwing a lot out there, and then having really reliable, now we're going to go back into that decision support framework, by being able to throw a lot out. This is not spaghetti testing, by the way. This isn't just throw a bunch of crap out there. There's method to this, there's structure around it, but it becomes very easy, very accessible structure, so we can test on a lot in a directed way. Again, it's not just throw crap out there, but we've got frameworks that allow us to move very, very quickly, very rapidly through these progressions, so that we know what to, if you hang around as much, you'll hear us talk a lot about killing, chasing, and graduating, and having decision frameworks around those, so that we can get really, really fast, rapid cycle times through here and graduate stuff up very effectively. But at its core, it's about how can we make it so that as long as it's not an actively bad idea, it's probably worth a test, and constantly trying to push that down, make things faster and faster, easier and easier to test on, but also with more and more clearly defined goals and decisions around the outcomes of these things that we're testing on. So there's not a lot of sitting around like, I don't know if we should make this investment in doing this video or building out this landing page. It's pretty, usually by the time we get there, it's clear.
Well, it's not a hard decision if you have my $10,000 copywriter, Matt. It's really not that big of an investment.
Yeah, that's right.
What I would say is
crazy copywriting.
For the AI workshop that we're going to do together, we're going to run a rapid experimentation called a flash test, an economic message flash test. And this is on the scale of low threshold, high threshold. This is as low threshold as we go. And it is also the foundational test. And it's what allows us to run, literally, I can set up a batch of hundreds of these tests and let it go. And each test costs just a couple bucks on average, and just takes a couple minutes to complete. So
the way that I've kind of I view this, because we talked about this over almost a year and a half ago, which is pretty crazy. So this was like 2021 when it was like April 2021, Matt, when I met you and we started doing rapid experimentation. And from a testing standpoint, here's what I like to tell everybody in like 2 sentences. I like to say, so instead of testing like 5 headlines like we used to back in the day, like I can test 50 headlines, dozens of creatives, dozens of primary text for a few dollars per test, maybe a few hours of work. And this was pre pre-AI, because we'd still have to do some of the work. A few dollars a test, a few hours of work, and in a few days. So these tests that we'd be running aren't going to take like weeks or months to validate on a conversion basis for the message, the creative, the copy, and all of that. You run these tests really fast for a few dollars. And like you said, Matt, rapidly, these automations are basically stopping it, and then you're taking these outliers and you're running with those. And then you get a lot of the algorithm love is what I think you call it. As you ascend through the different levels of testing and so forth. I want to just share a little testimony of what this has done. So anyone listening, I call it the ad lab method. We have a variation of this that I borrowed from Matt. Ours is, I borrowed it in the most flattering way. We do some things a little bit differently. What I would say is this, so when we first applied this to our business in like January of 2021, we didn't run a whole lot of ads for us because didn't have a lot of confidence, and we couldn't really get them to scale at the KPIs that we had for our own business. And we spent like $3,000, I think, in ads in all of 20. Now we have an agency side, which we manage a lot more than that. But for ourselves, we were spending like $3,000 a month in the whole month of January 2021. January 2022, we had started spending $3,000 a day. And then as we've kind of gone into, I'm not 2021, I'm sorry, met you in 2022, we're in 2023 now. So within 1 year, we went from $3,000 in monthly spend to $3,000 a day. And as of recently, we've cracked new thresholds of like $5,000 to $6,000 a day, leveraging this methodology. We never could have done that if we didn't have you guys sharing a lot of the stuff that you've shared with us and been able to do this rapid experimentation. If we just went with our gut, my gut is wrong like 89.7% of the time.
And it's slow.
And it's so slow. Yeah. And now that we've introduced AI to it, it's a whole different level of speed that we can test versus coming up with 50 headlines, low threshold on our own. It takes way longer than when you have ChatGPT helping you out with that and you have the avatar built for it. Huge growth we have seen in our business just by implementing this. I say all this because this is just from me having the benefit of just interviewing both of you guys on the podcast twice in the last year. So I would kind of say this: anybody who is remotely wanting to grow their business and not fall behind, you need to go to and register for the workshop, aiadsworkshop.com. It's August 22nd. If you're listening after August 22nd, 2023, maybe there will be a replay that we just link up for it. Tough luck. But if it's before then and you're listening to this, it's coming up. Go register for it. It's free. It's going to be 3 hours, I think. Stafford, I think that's what we have blocked. Yeah. 3 hours of diving really deep into this. And we've had the benefit of seeing some of the behind the scenes stuff that you guys are going to be covering. And it's really, really solid. So I would encourage everybody to go register for that. Do you guys have anything else that you want to say kind of before we close out here?
No, I mean, I would just once again come back to, I'm not a doom and gloom. Like if you're not using AI, but I do think that AI is going to transform our industry, and the better you understand it, the better off you are. I also happen to think that this concept of doing it around low threshold, rapid experimentation is the best fit that I've found for it currently. So I feel like this is a really good natural opportunity to jump on this bandwagon and jump ahead of your competitors and set the tone for the future. I really do think it's going to be, this is just fundamentally going to shift how we do things and how the platforms work as well.
Cool. Well, everyone,
show up and you'll get SOPs on how to do this stuff as well. So,
throwing in some bonuses.
Yeah,
bonuses.
Dylan at the Ecommerce Alley is he's a brutal tyrant on helping me get organized more than I've ever been organized before. And so, if I'm going to spend all this time writing out exactly how to do it, there'll be some elements of this that I'll probably be able to share. That's pretty portable to any business that's online. So.
Cool.
Just go do that.
I love
it.
Very cool. Well, everyone, Attend the workshop, AIAdsworkshop.com. We'll also have a link in the description of wherever you're listening or watching this podcast. Shout out to Dylan Counts, the producer of the E-Commerce Alley podcast. If you're not part of the E-Commerce Alley Facebook group, go to alleypodcast.com/group. It's free. There's a little more than 4,000 of us in there, and we'll see you at the workshop and in the next episode.